Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to the Divine Union podcast. And I'm really excited because today we're talking about the shadow side to polarity. Polarity is one of my favorite topics, and it's something that a term that gets thrown around a lot. And oftentimes it's misunderstood and not taught in a way that um, serves relationships and connection and intimacy. And so, hence, what happens when that happens? Something lives in the shadow. And I'm really excited this topic. I've been going on a kick with it lately as I've picked back up my book I've been working on for years on bridging the masculine feminine divide. And this is but one little aspect that has been coming up in my writing that I'm really passionate about is this idea of polarity, because polarity is so valuable for relationships. It's what makes magnetic attraction. It's what creates magnetic attraction, that spark, that push and pull in partnership. And way many people think about polarity is they think about it as in masculine feminine roles, aka man in the masculine pole, woman in the feminine pole. And the challenge with this approach is whenever first we're in two roles, set roles, ways of being, think about if you're in a set way of being, eventually it becomes boring. It becomes exhausting. It becomes tiresome, right? If you're always the one initiating plans and leading and initiating the intimacy and providing and doing and directing and making the decisions. And if one person's always supposed to be the one who's receiving and surrendering and in flow and receptive and sensitive and soft and vulnerable, what happens? It's exhausting. Those roles don't serve anyone. And well, there's two things here too. There's healthy masculine feminine energies, and then there's distorted masculine feminine energies. And on both sides, polarity you can get wrong. So on the distorted side, it sets up women to be dependent on men and letting men lead. And what happens eventually? They become resentful because they're not actually expressing themselves in partnership. They wanting the man to lead and to read the mind, and they're dependent. It creates dependency, and so what happens? It creates a hierarchy. Yeah, and that's never fun in relationship. That actually impacts intimacy on a negative way. Any hierarchy. And this distorted energetic on the other side, in certain polarity communities, they teach men to be individualistic and dominant and aggressive. And that doesn't, and maybe also as just being the providers and the caretakers financially. And that also creates resentment on the masculine side. And so we wonder why there's these, and this is changing over time, and I'll speak to it, but why there's this long standing history of masculine seeks freedom from the feminine. Feminine stifles his sense of independence and freedom. Now, not every relationship is like this because there's so many iterations. I'm not going to speak to all, but I'm speaking to this dynamic in particular. Even if your relationship is not that way, where you're in a dependency mode, that conditioning has been here for years with the history of gender roles and the familial unit and women being financially dependent on the masculine, that still lives in the psyche of many women and men today. That push and pull in an unhealthy way where one feels restricted by the other. And this is what happens when we're in roles. Now, even if you look at the positive side of it, of like good, healthy, conscious feminine energy of surrender and flow and vulnerability, and good, conscious masculine, active masculine energy of leadership and initiation and direction, it still becomes exhausting when we get stuck in these roles and we don't have fluidity between the roles, because it puts an undue pressure on different parties in different ways to lead the relationship in different ways. One may lead emotionally, one may feel obligated to lead physically or with the intimacy. So, what we really want is this beautiful flow where both parties can toggle between leveraging their active masculine energy. So, masculine energy, think of it like that's the active energy. So, it's the doing, it's the producing, it's the creating, it's the providing, it's the giving, it's the leading, it's initiating intimacy. It is setting goals, it's taking aligned action, it is communication and expression, it's anything outwards into the world. Healthy feminine receptive energy is anything that's receptive or inward. So it's your ability to receive what another's saying, active listening, going inwards, reflecting, your intuition, receptive energy, curiosity, receptive energy, attunement, emotional attunement to another, receptive energy, emotional attunement to your own feelings and bodily sensations as a guide for how you're feeling in a moment, feminine energy. And another shadow when it comes to polarity is we tend to assume masculine is man, feminine is woman. And this is why I believe now in the world, well, eventually we're not even going to have, with gender fluidity and gender has changed so much in our world and how people identify. But I feel though that those strict misunderstanding of masculine feminine energy, active and receptive energy, is what's created this whole uprising of I don't have to identify as a feminine being if I'm a woman at birth. And also, I see both sides, because then also we can just refer to them as active and receptive energies without having to label it masculine, feminine, because those terms, given our history, carry so much weight. And sometimes it makes it harder for someone to receive what someone's sharing on the topic, or to receive the lesson in that moment when it's tied to a label of masculine and feminine. But it's really just balancing the active and receptive energies. And when we do it, this is how we're going to have amazing, deeply passionate, wild relationships, because it's fun when both parties can take part in seducing each other and leading in intimacy, and both parties can receive and surrender. Both parties want to feel their partner surrender to them, to their own pleasure. It feels good. Uh, it feels good to witness that and to see that in your partner. And both parties deserve to be supported by one another emotionally and financially. And it's a heavy burden for anyone to have to carry the financial providership weight of the partnership. And it's a heavy burden to carry for anyone to carry the emotional caretaking weight of the partnership. And you take what resonates from this and leave at the door what doesn't, because I know not everyone will agree with me. And people always say, with equality, sometimes there's got to be roles. And yes, sometimes roles do support. Yet, I do believe, and I stand by it, that when anyone feels pegged into a role and there isn't flexibility, so it's like, I have to do this or else we're not going to be okay because I have to care for everyone else, that causes resentment. And so it's noticing that and finding ways to bring more balance into partnerships so that we prevent that from happening and both parties can really feel supported and there's mutual collaboration for whatever the goals are that you are setting to accomplish within that year or couple years. And yeah, it's just such a beautiful thing when we shift that narrative and we start to really look at them as energies that we all have within, that we can all cultivate more balance within. We can rewire our relationship to them because so often we talk about the energies in their distorted versions, like wounded masculine. We like shame someone. The way we talk about someone, they're in their wounded masculine or they're wounded feminine. But that's why I say sometimes the gender makes the label. But thinking of them as healthy, active, and passive energies. So, we already named what they are. I'm not going to do it again. But even the masculine is also asserting boundaries and expressing. And the feminine, of course, you got to think and reflect in order to express. And so allowing both to be and working on both. And whenever you're out of balance, looking at what do I need to cultivate to bring myself into greater balance. Because as a feminine being, we need our healthy masculine in order to surrender. I need to feel strong in my core of who I am. I need to trust myself. I need to trust my ability to navigate life, to be okay. Should anything happen in partnership, anything unfavorable in my life, any challenges come, I got to trust my ability to care for self so I can truly surrender and relax into life. And as a masculine being, for me to truly lead and be that powerful, impactful, influential force in life, in my relationships, in my career, I need to be attuned to energy, to read people, to read a room, to understand what my partner needs, to notice when my partner is reacting out of trigger, closing, protesting behavior. And I need to illuminate that with consciousness. So much on this beautiful topic. I would love to hear in the comments, by way of the comments, the reviews, what landed for you with this episode. And, it's been a while since I've said this, but yeah, we love feedback on the podcast by way of the reviews. It's how we keep the podcast moving forward, especially with them algorithms, how it works. And we want to get more eyes and ears on the podcast so we can really spread this mission of greater connectedness and intimacy and consciousness among our planet. Thank you, beautiful people, for tuning into this week's episode of Divine Union. It's been such a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And until then, may all your unions be divine.